Well, during the morning for Bible class, we looked at Daniel chapter 1, and I called that From Doubt to Victory. And we talked about some places where you get to choose, am I going to be the victor or the victim? During our worship hour, we were in Daniel chapter 2, and we talked about being tested. And we especially got over to Nebuchadnezzar and this dream, and he does not understand, and I still don't understand why Daniel would tell him, other than the fact that he was about to kill him. Why do you tell the king your kingdom's coming to an end, or your ruling is coming to an end? Well, we move on, and we're in chapter 3. Chapter 3 has the more familiar story of, I don't know, something about fire and a den, the fire. Wednesday nights at Chapel Hill, we've been working our way through Jonah for the last month or so. And it finally occurred to some of them, you know, there's a whole lot more to the book of Jonah than just a man who went the wrong direction and got thrown overboard and a great fish swallowed him. That's our Sunday school class, right? That's our children's classes. There's a whole lot more to Jonah than that. This is a Sunday school lesson, but there's a whole lot more to it than that. I've called the lesson Refuse to Give In. Regardless of what other people are doing, refuse to get in. In Ethiopia, 98% of Ethiopians, this was from earlier this year, said that religion is very important in their lives. We didn't talk about what religion, but 98% of Ethiopians said religion was a very important part of their life. Pakistan, 94% of Pakistanians said it's a very important part of our lives. 93% in Indonesia. 88% Nigeria. 86% Uganda. Do you want to know about us? The number, the percentage of Americans who say that religion is very important in their lives today is 41%. 41% of Americans, it didn't ask whether they attended worship or not, or where they just, is religion important? And 41% of Americans said it was. That makes us 15th in the world. You had all those 90s, and we're down here. And I don't know if you look at statistics, I probably look too much. The number is going down quickly. Quickly, the percentage of Americans who say religion is important. Have you ever, as a Christian, just wanted to kind of throw your hands up? I'm not talking about giving up on Jesus. I'm not talking about quitting church. There's somebody that I've been talking to, and I've asked them, and I've asked them, and I've asked them, and they will not come to worship with me. Or I've tried to get a Bible study, and they will not let me have a Bible study. I tried. I don't know what else to do. When you have meetings like this, or a regular gospel meeting, and preachers have to say, now invite everybody you know. Make sure you invite somebody. And inevitably, somebody comes up to me and says, I invited 25 people, and none of them came. So are they going to invite the next time? Just keep working, keep doing it. But sometimes the temptation is, I've asked, I've tried, and it's not working. I'm done. Done all I can do, I'm done. We want to talk about that a little bit with Daniel and his friends. The idea of bringing others to Jesus, or in his case, to God. Sometimes we decide it's a lost cause. Well, the first thing I wanted to talk about was being convicted. Being convicted. Daniel chapter 3, verses 1 to 12 come from there. That's what we read in our scripture reading earlier. I'm not going to take the time to read all of that. But you know the story. Nebuchadnezzar has this statue, and all the people around Nebuchadnezzar say, you're it. You're the best there ever was. Let's put that up and make it a decree that everybody has to worship that statue, that idol, that god. And while you're at it, let's make another rule. That if anybody fails to bow down, They're done. See, Nebuchadnezzar was not really, he made the rule, but his helpers told him what the rule needed to be. See, sometimes we're not the one who started off with the bad plan, but we listen to friends and we listen to coworkers and we wind up with a bad plan. So Nebuchadnezzar listens. That list of instruments, 3 times in that 12 verses? If you hear that sound, bow down. The friends knew that Daniel and his friends wouldn't bow down. So immediately, they go to Nebuchadnezzar to tell on him. These people over here, they're not doing what you told them to do. I still teach some college classes. And I have some students who will come up, now college students, who will walk up to me after class and they'll get real close and say, "Did you know?" And they'll tell me somebody's name. "Wasn't paying attention in class." You're in college. Leave that one alone. Or they'll come in and say, "Did you see them come in late?" Yeah, I can see them. But they want to tell me everything. It's usually the same student in every class who wants to tell me everything that's going on. So here are the friends around Nebuchadnezzar. Let me tell you. Let me tell you what's going on. Some of you had siblings. Did you have a sibling that told everything they knew to mama? See, I was the baby. And I don't know why, but my sister was in trouble a lot. You with me? Because anything my sister did, Mama, let me tell you. And she always got in trouble and I got off with whatever it was. But here's Nebuchadnezzar, and there's going to be this fiery furnace if you don't bow down. So here we are. The government says, don't talk about religion in school, public school. What do? The government and your boss usually say, don't talk about religion at work. What do? I know of way too many families holidays are coming up and we're with family members. I know of way too many family members who say, I can't bring up religion when I go home because my uncle, my aunt, my cousin, whoever said if I ever brought up that subject again, they'd never speak to me again. What do? Do we bow down? We quit? I'm not suggesting we be obnoxious. I'm not suggesting we be in people's faces saying, here's what's going to happen. I'm suggesting we have faith regardless. We don't have to get in their face, but we have faith regardless. Sometimes people pay attention because of your life. The man who owned the radio station in Tupelo that I went to work for also owned the radio station in Jackson, Tennessee that I worked for. He was one of these guys who the only way he knew how to talk was with bad language. When he said good morning, he had something to go with that made you cringe. He knew who I was. He knew what I stood for. In fact, when I left Jackson, Tennessee, I told him I was going back home and I had a place I was going to be preaching and working at the local radio station. His response was, what kind of church you preaching for? I'll buy it for you. In Tupelo, so I could say. He didn't really mean it, but in Jackson, I'm sorry. He did mean it. That's the way he thought. Well, several years went by and I've not seen him in a number of years, and I hear that he's remarried. His wife died while I was working for him. She had brain cancer. And it was a good while before he remarried. But I heard that he had gotten married. And I heard that a preacher in our brotherhood in Corinth had married them. He's never walked in a church building in his life, and he got a Church of Christ preacher to marry him. So I get to check in, and I finally talked to the preacher. And he said, oh, yeah, we have farms next to each other, but you want to know why I did the wedding? He remembered you and talked about you and your faith. And he said, whatever religion he is, that's who I want to marry me. Now, that doesn't make conversion, but people notice. People pay attention when we are Christians wherever we go. Others change colors. We talked about that earlier too, that we're Christians around Christians and we're anything else but Christians when we're around other people. So here is this thing that's happening with Daniel and his friends. I called it conviction. They had to be convicted of what was right. But then, secondly, they had a choice. They were convicted. There's a choice. Don't we all have choices? We all have choices. Sometimes we make those choices difficult because we say, do you want chocolate ice cream or do you want vanilla ice cream? Both? Isn't that an option? Both? Or, I don't know, could I have vanilla with chocolate syrup? Or some other, there are options out there, and sometimes we make them too difficult. We force them, there's a thing in logic about it, that we force them to do an either or, and that's just not life. But it is. It's either follow or don't. Obey or don't. We're in Daniel 3, verse 13 through verse 15. They've told Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel 3, starting with verse 13, Nebuchadnezzar in his rage and fury commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke and said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now, if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if ye do not worship, you shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is it? Who is that God that will deliver you out of my hands? One more chance. We'll give you one more chance. If you'll give up now, everything's okay. But if you don't, here are the consequences. One more chance. We do one more chances occasionally. You do this, or parents, consequences. You do this, or here are the consequences. Consequences aren't always the same as they were when I was growing up, but consequences nonetheless. We're facing consequences. You're in Nebuchadnezzar's presence. And he says one more time, we're a fiery furnace. What do we do? You going into the furnace? You got to bow down and say it's okay. I mean, after all, they could have said, we're going to worship that image. We'll give in. And then gone home and done something else. They could have done that. Saved themselves. But that wouldn't be right. And that's not what they did. Will you bow down or not? Or will you denounce your religion or not? One passage from the New Testament is in Luke chapter 9, verse 23 through verse 26. We're already warned by Jesus about some of the things that would happen. Luke 9, starting in 23. He said to them all, if any man will come after me, and let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Whoever will lose his life shall lose it, but whoever will lose his life for my sake, the same shall save it. For what is a man advantaged if he gain the whole world and lose himself, or be cast away? For whosoever shall be ashamed of me and my words, of him shall the Son of God, the Son of Man, be ashamed, when he shall come in his own glory and in his Father's and of the holy angels. Confess me or not. Be ashamed of me or don't. I'm on social media way, way, way too much. And occasionally somebody will post a religious something meme, and they'll put down below it, Jesus says if we won't deny him, so I'm sharing this. If you're a Christian, you'll share this too. That's not the way it works. I just put a picture up and that solves everything. That's not what Jesus meant. He meant serve him, follow him, worship him. Refuse to give in. Daniel and his friends are saying no, or his friends are saying no. Could we give in? Could we give in? We've joked, some of us, about football, about favorite schools and favorite teams. You ever been around somebody long enough that you decided, well, I'll just go along with you. That team's okay, because you're tired of arguing? I preached in Russellville, Alabama for about 4 years. We'd driven from New Albany to Russellville the Saturday before I'm going to preach on Sunday. I get in a hotel room and say, there's bound to be a football game on. Got to be something. The boys were still young. Let's watch football. I turned it on, and I didn't follow it well enough to know what was going on. But when I turned it on, it was the Iron Bowl. If you're not from Alabama, you don't know. But Alabama and Auburn are playing football, and it's a rough game. They're fighting to the end. And it dawns on me, this is a church of 300, little more. And when I was talking to the elders to start with, they said, we're a 50-50 congregation. What does that mean? Half of us are Alabama through and through. And the other half is Auburn through and through. So what do you do? Do you go say, well, I'm going to be over here with you because you're an elder and you might hire me? Or do you go over here and say, I want to be your friend. I want you to hire me. So I get up and say that Sunday morning, I thank you for letting me be here today. I understand I won't be getting this job. Yesterday, football, and half this audience is mad. They took it the way I tried to do it. I'll fix it for all of you. It doesn't matter whether Alabama or Auburn won that game yesterday. The Vols are still the best team. And they hired me anyway. So we got to make some choices. Should I have gone? So I stayed faithful to the Vols. We moved to Mississippi, and that began turning a little bit toward Mississippi State. I'm sorry if you like Oxford or Ole Miss. Nobody threw anything. My wife's family is Mississippi State, and both of our boys went there for a little while. So, do you take it and say, I want to be your friend? I just thought of this one, have to tell it. This boy was from Pontotoc, and my boy is at Mississippi State playing tuba in the band. The boy from Pontotoc is at Ole Miss playing trumpet from the band. I knew that he didn't like Ole Miss, but they gave him a scholarship, and they offered the degree he wanted to get. I'm going to Ole Miss. So my son's standing back off the sidelines with his tuba, and his friends marching right toward him after their show performance, and he grabs his Ole Miss jacket and pulls it up to show his Mississippi State shirt underneath. You got to decide someday, is it State, is it Ole Miss, or for us, is it Jesus, or is it not? Well, I want to do a third C. This time we're looking at the conclusion of Daniel 3. Daniel chapter 3, we'll start reading in verse 16 and go to verse 30. That's a long passage, but let's read together from Daniel 3. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. We're not afraid to answer you. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. He will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods or worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed. You can see people get mad. I'm not mad. Here's Nebuchadnezzar. And he spoke against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. He commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, cast them out of the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen and their hats, and their other garments. They were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandments was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flames of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's a hot fire. These 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished. He rose up in haste and spake and said unto his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound in the midst of the fire? And they said unto the king, True, O king. And he answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose and walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of their 4th is like the Son of Man. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. The princes, governors, captains, king's counselors being gathered together saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was a hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed upon them. Nebuchadnezzar speaks. Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own. Therefore, I make a decree. That's where we started. I make a decree. Every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut to pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So is this a story about a fiery furnace? That's the story. But the story means something more than that, doesn't it? The story says we're going to be tempted, we're going to be tested, we're going to have people tell us to stop. Are we going to bow down to the image or not? And then somebody says, you can't be my friend if. Can't be my friend. Are we friends or do we worship God? And in the end, Nebuchadnezzar sees it and tells everybody, serve their God. One last story. In Hickman County, Tennessee, where I graduated high school, there was a boy who was a couple of years older than me who was very much an outcast. He went to church, attended worship every time we were meeting. Nobody at church talked to him. He was a decent student. None of the students really had anything to do with him. He just did not fit in. And he made it worse because he announced he wanted to be a preacher. He wanted to go to Freed Hardeman and preach in high school. Really? You're going to preach? Well, he told the story. Hickman County has a lot of dirt roads still. A lot of roads that you've got to know where they are. You're not getting there. And on a Saturday night, these 3 other guys had finally started talking to him, and they said, we're going to pick you up Saturday, we'll go ride. They're on these dirt roads in the middle of nowhere, Hickman County, Tennessee, and one of them starts reaching for beer. They're passing beer around, and he just passed it on, didn't take any. And they noticed, and they passed some more, and he didn't take any, and they noticed. After a while, they finally said, it won't hurt, just take a sip. Be okay. No. Fiery furnace. His response finally was, their response was, either drink beer or we're going to put you out on the road. Chapman area doesn't have a whole lot of street lights going on. We're out on dirt roads with no street lights, no road signs, no idea where you were. And he said, stop the car right now. And he walked most of the night from where that car was back home. He had no parental support. They could care less about church. But his conviction was so strong that when the fires lit up, he said, I'm going to do what's right. That's tough. It's tough. That's what we're called to do, is to be Christians regardless of what's going on around us. 68% of Americans say religion is very important. That means 32% don't find it important. And again, those numbers are changing rapidly. So what do we do? What do we do with those numbers? Here's my lesson for the 3 lessons. Be faithful. We're faithful regardless of what goes on around us and who may be saying things around us. And then I added a question in my notes. Will you step into the furnace because you stand convicted of what God wants you to do? We're going to sing another song of encouragement this afternoon. If you're not a Christian, come to the furnace. God hears, He forgives, He heals. If you've not been buried in Christ in baptism, you've never confessed the name of Jesus, we want you to do that before we leave today. If you're here as a Christian and you want us to pray for you before we leave today, we'd be glad to do that as well. If you need a public response, we invite you to come while we stand, while we sing.